Muted.
Are we muted?
Not anymore.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. A little bit of Zoom etiquette right off the bat. We're going to ask that everybody stay muted. And then if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat box, or you can use the raise your hand icon. It's at the bottom of the screen next to the, in the little emoji box. So to start off, I'd like to take a moment to collectively acknowledge that Zeitgeist and the Twin Ports are built on land that was originally Anishinaabe and is home to the Anishinaabe, who are the original stewards of this territory. This land was ceded by the Anishinaabe in the 1854 Treaty of La Pointe, and historically and today it holds great significance for Indigenous peoples. We're committed to uplifting the name of these lands and community members from these nations who we live with. And this event is part of Zeitgeist's annual Winter Bike Week, which is a week-long celebration and promotion of active living strategies for everybody in our community. We've got several other events throughout the week, and you'll see those on your screen here. There's more information about those at the link at the bottom of your screen at bit.ly/WBW2021. And with that, we've got a couple more people coming in here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Mike Casey and Dick Haney from Friends of Western Duluth Parks and Trails.
Well, hi. First, I want to thank Zeitgeist for putting on Winter Bike Week. I think it's an awesome event, and I love what the Zeitgeist does. They do a lot of work for our community and around this subject of alternative transportation. Multimodal transportation. So I think we'll start by sharing our PowerPoint, if I can find it. I think it disappeared. Why does it not show up? That's scary. Any idea why my PowerPoint wouldn't show up on the screen?
Oh, there you go. You got it.
That's top secret stuff. Can't show that. Here we are, right there. So first, this is all about the Cross City Trail. Dates, it goes way back. The Friends became advocates on this, probably starting with the River Corridor Coalition back in 2015-14. But this is what we're going to cover tonight: who we are, history, the early days of the Cross City Trail, then move into like the mid-2000s with the transportation bill and planning, the public meeting process throughout that, where we are now, including the detour in Lincoln Park and where we are going, and then maybe a little bit about how we advocate for this. First, we're Friends of Duluth Western Parks and Trails. This is our mission statement. We organize to enable citizens, and I can't see the whole thing, and I don't have it memorized. We've organized to enable citizens and other interested groups to better partner with the city to plan, design, construct, and maintain the best possible parks and trails in Western Duluth. A little history: we formed as a committee in a group called the River Corridor Coalition during the St. Louis River Corridor Initiative back in 2014 under the Ness administration. I think he extended one of the half and half tourism tax levies, I guess you'd say, and refocused it into the River Corridor area, which is about 26 to 28 individual projects. And we've probably touched almost every single one of them. We've really focused on the Cross City Trail, and back then it was called the Western Waterfront Trail Extension, and we worked hard to assure that the little tourist train out here could help bolster that trail with the rail and trail system. So that's been a success so far. The River Corridor Coalition dissolved 2 years later after its start, and we continued on under a new name. We renamed ourselves Friends of Western Duluth Parks and Trails. We're not a nonprofit, but we are registered with the state. I like to say this about our group. We are a bunch of members that have been with the Cross City Trail from its inception. Basically, past employees, folks involved in many nonprofits that have promoted and continue to promote healthy lifestyles. So I've often said we house what I call the memory bank and the continuity of the Cross City Trail vision. Why that's significant is administrations come and go, and so there can be many changes along the way when a project like this is so large and it takes so much time. It kind of gets pushed and pulled around many different directions. So having those around that continue to work towards the vision is critical to the outcome of the project, or at least that's how we see it. Mr. Haney here, who's been around from the beginning, is going to cover the past up till about the 2000s.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'm Dick Haney, native Duluthian. I've been here for a long time and involved in the city, a lot of city projects over the years. I want to do what I call a loose and brief history. The reason it's loose is that there are some assumptions in there, and it's my interpretation of important people and things over the past 40 years that have and still are affecting the Cross City Trail. So on the screen, I did what I call an expanded vision of the Cross City Trail, and the vision itself will be briefer than that, but that's the vision that started probably for the most part with Jim Overstar. So moving back, I'm going to go back to about the 1970s. And I call this the tail wagging the dog, because what occurred was the Cross City Trail, first section adjoining the Munger at the trailhead, is yet to be built, and so the rest of the dog is existing, but the tail exists, but the dog itself is. Having said that, I think we'll start with Will Munger, who was for a long time a legislator, a state legislator, and environmentalist, and when the BN abandoned the rail that comes from St. Paul to into the western part of Duluth, he saw to, and he was the initiator to get that rail to become a trail, and that became the Munger Trail sometime during the 1970s. What they call the Munger Trail runs from the Munger Trailhead, which is the Indian Point Park area in Western Duluth, to Hinckley. Actually, the rail goes further than that, and that's been part of a trail too. So it's possible for people to commute or to travel along that old rail for all the way from the cities up to Duluth. So that was significant to James Overstar, and also we found there's an old Duluth bikeway plan that the ARDC issued in 1975, and in that document it mentions that the east to west trail across Duluth as a first priority. James Gittemeyer still has that document. It's kind of interesting. So it goes back to about the time when people started thinking about this trail. Some important personalities and why I think they're significant, and they'll appear throughout here, but a couple of legislators, John Blotnick, who was the House of Representative person for this in the federal government for many years, retired in 1974. And then that's when James Oberstar, who served as his aide, was elected to be that next representative. I mentioned Blotnick because his name is, and he had something to do with the Blotnick Bridge going from Duluth to Superior. And that Blotnick Bridge has a potential for being a trail, a bicycle pedestrian trail that would connect to the Cross City Trail and connect us to Superior through non-motorized transportation. And then James Oberstar served in the House from 1975 until 2011 when he was defeated. But he had this vision of that he shared with some significant Duluthians, and I'll mention some of those in a bit. He had the dream of tying together the Munger Trail to the Gitchi Gami Trail, which goes up the North Shore from the eastern end of Duluth. So, and his aide was Don Ness, who was the mayor of Duluth, who also has been involved in the St. Louis River corridor initiatives, and certainly has had some impacts that we'll mention later on the Cross City Trail. So Oberstar started with this vision of the trail from the Munger to Brighton Beach. And what happened in downtown Duluth, the freeway came through. And that was significant and related to the Cross City Trail. The freeway began, I think, Thompson Hill, something like 1964, and it got as far as Masaba Avenue, where it terminated, and for a number of years, because it was very controversial how that was going to get through town. You were aware that the freeway coming through the western part of town destroyed or took over a lot of properties and homes, and was elevated. And the plan was then to run that elevated trail through downtown Duluth and actually out into Lake Superior. It was going to be an elevated trail through Lake Superior. There was a furor, an uproar by people in Duluth that we would do that to Lake Superior. And why the engineers came up with that is kind of hard to understand. But some significant people, Kent Worley and Bill Majewski, were architects that worked for Architectural Resource. And Kent Worley, and with the support of Bill, were instrumental in leading the opposition to that route or to that style of the freeway. And Kent Worley did a lot of the design. The Lake Walk or the Lake Park is his design, and even some of the tunnels. When they put the reason I'm bringing it in here is when they put the tunnels in, they had to blast a lot of rock out to get those tunnels in from the central part of town until you get out to about 21st Avenue East. That rock was added to the shoreline down close to Canal Park, adding about 6 acres of land to that area. And that provided the opportunity for the Lake Walk, which was a part of the entire route from west to east. So the freeway then provided that opportunity to do that. And the Lake Walk was the first part of that Cross City Trail to be completed. There's probably some argument there. There are a couple of spots where it's not yet completed, but it does go now out to all the way out to Brighton Beach. So Bill Majewski left that architectural firm and then went into the planning office in Duluth, where he served for many years. Now he's retired. He lives out here in the western part of town, and he's been an activist. He's one of our members of the Friends of the Western Duluth Parks and Trails, and he serves on the St. River Alliance. So he's still very active. I want to jump to something that I call connectivity, because the Cross City Trail is a part of a system that connects trails and bikeways throughout the city, a non-motorized system. And that, if we go back to 1888, there was a man by the name of William Rogers. He was the first. He was the first president of the first Parks Committee or Parks Department in the city. So he was the first person to lead the Parks Department. He had a vision for a trail, a parkway that ran the length of the city along the ridge overlooking Duluth. And he accomplished completion of some of that. And now we call it the Skyline Parkway. And Sam Snively, who was a mayor that followed around 1900, he shared that vision and he completed that upper trail. In Rogers, with his vision, he also envisioned a trail, a similar pathway along the shore of Lake Superior with vertical trails connecting the upper and lower horizontal portions, parkways. So I mentioned that is the blueprint for much of what we're talking about today when we talk about connectivity in the system across Duluth. Then there were several organizations, of which I was a member of, some of them anyway. There was a woman in Duluth, she's still here, Mimi Stender, who founded the Fit City Duluth and even sponsored it financially. And Fit City Duluth focused on organizations and healthy active living and the transportation, non-motorized transportation. And so connectivity was a big part of that. And the Fit City Duluth had professional people who were involved in healthy lifestyles and medical fields and so forth. And it lasted for a number of years, but then Mimi was having to withdraw from that. It became the Healthy Duluth Area Coalition. And we hired Lisa Lukala to be the first executive director of that organization. Healthy Duluth, to secure funding, it came under the YMCA. They housed it for a while, and then that's ceased, and so it became part of Zeitgeist, and it's no longer called Healthy Duluth Area Coalition, but it's you, the people that are putting on this organization today. And then when Lisa left to work for the city, Shauna became that person, and then Shauna moved on, and now it is Stevie. Andrea, okay. that is that. So those were some of the organizations that carried on the mission or the vision of the earlier organizations. One of the things that we did, some of us who were involved in the Healthy Duluth Area Coalition and before that, we're working on a vertical connector. We had the Cross City Trail as a horizontal connector. We have the Skyline Parkway that's a vertical or a horizontal connector on the top of the hill, but we have to get people up and down the hill. So we came up with a plan for, we called it the Lowell to Lake Walk. It's now called the Campus Connector, but it was connecting the Lake Walk at about 32nd Avenue East up the hill through the Congdon, the Creek corridor, up to and through the Mount Royal area and over to University of Minnesota Duluth and through the campus and over to Scholastica and through the Scholastica campus over to the Rice Lake Road. That was to be of design similar to what the Cross City Trail and Lake Walk is, that it would be a 10-foot wide paved accessible trail. There are some steep grades that challenge that, but some of that has occurred already, that connector up there. And that would serve, there are, I don't know how many thousands of students, probably 12,000 college students, but also a number of public schools that would benefit from having that trail. Some of that exists right now, and there's still some sections that need to be completed. That would be one of the vertical connectors, and there's potential for, although they haven't been identified, I think the Piedmont corridor area, Highway 53 going up the hill, has potential, and now the potential for developing the Morris Thomas Road as a major bicycle route that connects to the Piedmont. That could be a vertical connector in the center of town, and maybe 40th Avenue West, something along there that would connect the lower part to the upper part of Duluth, and we're all aware that we have that vertical challenge created by our beautiful city. So that's part of the system and part of the grid. And it's that connectivity is also expressed in, I think Judy Gibbs is on this call here, when she was the trails coordinator for the city in 2011 with a team of Duluth citizens, developed the Duluth Trails and Bikeway Plan. And that was a plan about connecting the trails and bikeways around the city, forming a connection. It was a little broader. Some of the trails were walking trails and whatever, but it was a blueprint for a grid for the types of transportation movement around the city that we're talking about. And James Gittemeyer at the MIC as well has worked and developed plans that are given to the city as guides for bike and pedestrian areas and trails and so forth. So the Cross City Trail and the Lake Walk are the main lower route, what I call non-motorized freeways and this is an important concept to understand, that the trails and bikeways system or grid can be likened to a motorized system where we have freeways and highways in streets and avenues and side streets and alleys, that we have not a particular trail cannot serve all of those functions, but rather we create this interconnected grid with serving different purposes, but facilitating a coordinated movement around from east to west. So we had, it already mentioned, the vertical connectors. There are to be several major ones that in the vision, and then spurs and side streets and so forth that would connect businesses, schools, neighborhoods, residences, that type of thing. I come back to the Blotnick Bridge because that is going to be, I hope, if we get it into the, or maybe it's the Bong Bridge that it happens on, that's more likely the Blotnick Bridge area. That would connect to the Cross City Trail. It would be a major connector to Superior and to their grid system over there, that in a way we're one city just separated by the body of water. So in 2005, and I think Mike's going to talk about this a little bit later, James Oberstar was the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the federal committee. And it was the first time ever he secured federal funds for bicycle transportation in the 2005 or thereabouts. And that was money that was to be used for and has been used for parts of the Cross City Trail. So he was a bicyclist, and he came to Duluth often and met with, I sat in on several meetings with him, and he was a real motivator for pushing this idea that was shared by a lot of people in Duluth. So I think that pretty much brings us up to how we got to where we are and some of the important people in the events that got us to this point. And what is, I think, very significant is that it took 30 years for the freeway to get through Duluth, the planning and the construction. It took a long time, 30 years. This Cross City Trail concept has been around for 40 years. So we're impatient. Some of us are approaching the end of our existence here, and it would be nice to have that completed, not just to please us, but to provide for a rational system for people to safely move about. And when you look at that section of town that is yet to be impacted by the Cross City Trail, the communities on the lower part of Grand Avenue and even on the upper part of Grand Avenue have been disenfranchised. They do not have that yet. And so safety along the safe transportation is tough to find out there, except along the bike trails, or what are they called, bike lanes along?
Bike lanes. Yeah.
Bike lanes along Grand Avenue. And for us who are not so stable anymore, and for children and whatever, it's not a safe route. And so those people do not have the opportunity for a safe transportation, a non-motorized transportation. So it's time to get them in the system and within the vision, because that vision has been challenged somewhat by the city proceeding with some other routes that probably won't serve in the same way. And I think Mike will cover most of that. Thanks. I hope I introduced you to one or two new things that you didn't know.
I'm sure you did, Dick. All the time with me, you do. What's on the screen here is the actually, what I've been told, very rare event that you get a trail actually written into a line item on a federal transportation bill, and it was $2.5 million back then, 2005. And then on the right, you see what looks to me like the application to activate that money in an application. And you can see here it's $4 million is the estimated cost. So back in 2005, that's pretty significant. And we lost a lot when James Oberstar lost the election, and then when he passed away. So so the next part here is this is one of the maps. That's the 2012 map. The planning 2009 to 2015 I'll cover, and beyond, really. It's about when I started getting involved. I too have a passion for the Cross City Trail because of my mother. I was a big bike rider when I was younger, and then not so much, but my mom was, and she always was riding on the wrong side of the road, and she preferred bike than car, and I really wanted to see the trail built before she passed, but she passed first. So I still think it's important to get it done, like Dick said, for everybody coming down the pike. This is out of the current mini master plan. This is the city's history timeline. I could dispute a couple of these little fine points, but you can see when it really started, the funding, there was, like Dick mentioned, there's been this vision for a long time and getting it going. So it really started getting some money behind it in 2005 with the transportation bill. Then the Lake Walk came along. That's in the blue here. I'll just go through this real quick. And some of the maps I got is in the 2010 era when they started. I think SEH came on board. Matt Bolf has been probably the prominent engineer through the whole, the actual designing of it from SEH. And you'll see some of that down the pike here. And then they apply for some legacy funding. And I'm not going to get into the funding of it because it's quite complicated and I don't want to misrepresent that. We have good city engineers, Carrie Peterson and Cindy Voigt, that can help you out if you have questions there. And then the phase one of the Cross City Trail, the Lake Walk to 30th Avenue West down here, happened in 2013. That actually was built in 2013. And then the catastrophe hit, I call it. They were having a hard time getting the trail designed and built. And around this time frame, some of the plans came forward and Irving didn't like it for very good reasons. And the Ness administration at that time stopped everything and started focusing on going above up on 6th Street. And the timing was such that we lost $500,000 at that time. So then a mini master plan kind of started up in 2015. And I think we were kind of inspirational in that, the work we did around this area when we formed. We started a survey. We did some on the ground looking at the different, up to 6 alignments at that time. We drew maps, we did surveys, we did a bunch of work. And we were working with Philby Williams and Judy Gibbs and them. And this, the mayor allowed a mini master plan to start happening to fill the gap. And we'll go through that. And then we can come back to that later. So there was all this planning going on. I don't want to bore you with it, but it's 2009 to 2010. There's community level liaison stakeholder meetings, I guess. I wasn't a part of that. People like Bill Majewski, Dick Haney, all those organizations that he talked about were probably in rooms talking about this plan, this trail. Then there were some public meetings, the Community Center West. I would show up to these meetings. They were more informational. They would show you all these alignments going through town, and Matt Wolf and different engineers would listen and hear people's comments on that, but they were really just focused on getting it done. They had money, but nothing was getting built. And then later in the year, they had another meeting, City Center West, which is out on 59th Avenue West here. And they would then come again, and then the alignments would change, a lot of questions. Well, now we got to switch the phasing from one to the other. And they finally determined in June of 2013, they could build this segment 1 from the Lake Walk to Carlton Avenue by the Heritage Center. So they did. There was some controversy in there. They built on Superior Street, which a lot of people didn't want it to be, but it got built on Superior Street. Then in 2014, we had this blow up at the City Center West about going through Irving. And then down in this area at the Denfeld meetings, we had some more trying to get through the gap, and we'll get to that. These are some of the plans to show you a little bit of due diligence with what everybody was doing, trying to figure out a way through town. Just a quick look for you. This was one of the ARDC maps where they thought they had a good alignment, but this is a troubling area down by the paper mill that never really panned out, cost and safety. All the different views in this area. This little green line is what Irving got upset about. Quite frankly, because they had other designs and neighborhood plans that they wanted to go along Keene Creek. So they rightly pushed back heavily. And then I'm gonna go to a Google map now, because in 2012, I'll just quickly show you, hope I didn't lose you all. Stop sharing this. start sharing that. This is my map of, I call it Cross City Trail over the years. There's this route in 1997 I found on a map. People talking about it, trying to figure out what to do. There's the 2005, all the different work out in this area up by Lincoln Park and in that area coming down through here. We got 2006, that one you saw before. And then 2010 was a lot of work around taking a look down by the paper mill on how to get through Irving. You notice all this stuff is below Grand Avenue. And then I'll just quickly jump up to here, and here's the mini master plan. All of a sudden we've got all this stuff up here, but yet we've got all these other things down in this area. And the interesting thing is the mini master plan, I'll share with you, didn't have the lower route in it for a while. I'm gonna blow by these because that map just showed all that. I mean, if somebody's got a question, you could jump in. I wanted to show this map. This is Duluth, Western Duluth before the freeway, and I wanted to show it because it deals with the lower DWP and what we lost when the city received this red line. That's the DWP. They started selling off little chunks of this, and it made it next to impossible to keep this a transportation corridor, which they should have. When you get railroad corridor out here, it's contiguous stuff, and we lost what I call the Greenway, and other people call the Greenway for the Cross City Trail, right below Grand Avenue here, with all these great connections, straight as a whistle, really great railroad beds, and come down and tie in. This is where it is right now. Segment 2 goes from here right to here right now. Whoops. So I just wanted to point that out, that we still have rail corridor out here, and we would hope that the city recognizes that rail corridor as valuable stuff. So segment 1 from the Lake Walk to Carlton Avenue was completed in 2013. And then in 2015, we started this mini master planning process to fill the gap. And I like to show this picture a lot because during the plan, segment 1 was built out to Carlton, and actually during this planning process, segment 4 was being discussed, located, engineered, and built. With it wasn't even discussed really in the mini master plan. So some people wanted to see the lower route in the plan, so they drew a line on the map and even extended it onto a piece of paper here. So that was a good deal. The mini master plan had a survey in it that, and this is the maps that were part of the survey. You'll see 4 alignments. It was narrowed down to 4. We looked at about 6 different ones. Grand Avenue was one of them. But nonetheless, there was 4 here. And they asked the citizens what they felt about each alignment. And this is the map depicting the gap. And this is really what the mini master plan focused on. You can see here that these lines are already in there. And that's all above Grand Avenue. That was never part of the vision until 2015. So you'll see here at the next mini master plan meeting, February 25th, the next year, we all got back together and we pretty much got to see the results of the input. And this is shows route alternatives, the red lines, as per the plan. But there was a lot of people asking for this stuff down here and this and some of these other connections. And might have had something to do with that map. So in the second planning meeting, they identified phase 2 and how do we get from here to there? You know, even knowing that this was built here. And that's how the lower route really got put into the final mini master plan, really by the citizens speaking up for what they wanted. And they pretty much knew what they wanted. So in this plan, you can, if you read this, you'll see that the vision of the Cross City Trail pretty much morphed because the city wanted to include in this Cross City Trail plan the upper DWP that is now called the Duluth Traverse, this yellow line. And it's called the soft surface section. There was a lot of pushback on that because the Cross City Trail is not a natural surface trail. It's a transportation funded route that's a 10-foot wide blacktop. And, but the vision kind of was being written to support this to get after some other funding. But you'll see in the next, this is part of the survey results. You can see where the river route was, they say it was overwhelming, the river route, the one that's segment 2 now down below. They say that was overwhelming because the next highest one was like, well, if you don't get this one, this is what we like. So that's what, where does it say it here? Indifference toward option 3, and that was option 3, the Mike Call Leo route. So the river route, as it was named, really became the public's choice. And they heard quite loudly too that the direct connection to the Munger Trail was wanted. And that's another reason that lower route was put in. So now we get to this, the current mini master plan, and that's what you see. This is the Munger Trail in red. You don't see that soft route anymore. It's just purely this, along with these upper routes and what we call segment 6, the lower route. So for our group, that's significant because that's what we view as the Cross City Trail, the one that connects the far west to the far east and the most direct alignment possible. And this is just a closer look at that. So this was built in 2015. The purple one, this map was made in 2019, but it was completed in 2020, segment 2. And segment 1 that goes through Lincoln Park and out to the Lake Walk was built in 2013. So that's where we are now, segment 1, segment 4, and segment 2. Where are we going? I think one of the exciting things that's happening, well, not so exciting, I guess, if I'd like it to stay, but with the TPI project coming through the can of worms, the MnDOT is going to be using Lower Michigan Street as the southbound traffic. So the Cross City Trail is going to cease there for a time being. And the city of Duluth is working with Tool Design on a detour, installing a temporary protected bike lane through Lincoln Park, which will be the very first protected bike lane in the city's history, besides the temporary one built, the pilot program that the MIC sponsored a few years ago. So that's going to go from 22nd Avenue West all the way to the M&H gas station along Superior Street. We're all pretty excited to have a protected bike lane in town. One of the issues we see is that it's temporary and it'll stay if the analysis shows that it's a positive impact, but if it stays, or even if we're not sure how the Lower Michigan route will come back, because we view the spine as critical, as the least amount of crossings and all ages type of thing. Protected bike lanes are great, but you still go across intersections, which can be troubling. This is a little look at the engineering drawing that was shared with me. One, they didn't want to share too much because it's not out for bid yet, but you can see how the parking is pushed out into the street a little bit, and then the protected bike lane will be down in this area. I'm still not quite clear on what the protection will be. I know a lot of it's going to be parked cars, if there'll be bollards or whatnot yet, but it's being designed by Tool Design in the city, so I'm sure it'll be a safe, protected route. It's just another couple views of this, and then I'll show you a sneak peek at a real early draft of it. I like this one because it actually shows it in place. You can see the cars parked here. They'll be pushed out into these parking spots, and then that's a two-way cycle track protected bike lane. So that's going to be happening. It's hard to tell for sure. I don't know if I say spring of 2021, the Michigan Street's going to go down, possibly to 2024. So I'm not sure where the city is at with the protected bike lane, but I'm thinking they're going to be going out for bids this spring. The other part we're at now, just the other night, segment 3, they held a public meeting on January 26th for segment 3, which I don't think I got it, maybe it's right. You know, I don't have a great view of that, but their segment 3 goes up in through King Creek and then up to Green Street. And that isn't something we don't advocate for that. We're trying to get the lower route built first and then create these spur connections to these other destinations. Because one, we've waited long enough, and the city needs to focus some time down here to pick out the lower route. And you can see by these nice graphics that the red line has a lot of grade issues. It's rather lengthy. And there are other alternatives below Grand Avenue, Highway 23, that are very doable, shorter, less grade issues, less difficulty getting land, depending on which one you look at. But it's really where we're encouraging the city to focus their time and efforts on. This is one of our later drawings showing the possibility. There's a couple options through where the Munger Trail stops here down the lower left, and a couple options to make your way through this area up to Fremont Street, which is basically by the zoo. And then you can use some utility and hopefully up in this area, get the BNSF right away. But if you can't get the BNSF right away, there's alternative routes that we can take. Raleigh Street for one, and different avenues to get up to the current trailhead at Irving Park. So that's a lot. This is, I'm sorry. I kind of want to run through all that stuff and see if there's any questions and see if anybody's not as familiar as others in the room, if we can answer any questions or share any information with anybody.
Hi, Ron Nemi here.
Hi, Ron.
I live on 64th West, and I sure hope that lower route is a possibility. It's quite a climb up to Green or whatever that route is, up to that existing trail. It would really reduce the use of the trail, I believe, if there wasn't this easier route. I would probably go along Raleigh to get through to the Munger if that were the case. So I certainly advocate for the lower route. I'm certainly appreciative of all your efforts, and I certainly will call my counselor, but is there more I can do to advocate for the lower route and get the city moving on that?
Just what you said. Contact your counselors, even write to the mayor about it. They need to hear from the citizens that what you just said is, when you look at the upper route, we don't think it's a horrible thing. It's just that it's not transportation. And when the lower route gets built, we can build spurs up there, and then the neighborhoods would have a nice loop for recreation. But those in Norton Park that want to go east or want to go west, they're probably not going to go up and then back and around. They're just going to go across Grand and get on what we call the lower route and go. So I don't know how many counselors understand this. We work hard at, they got a lot on their plate, so it's hard for them to understand everything all the time. And then it is the administration's priority. The administration sets the priority for which the staff works on. So we're hopeful that we can get the administration to set the priority for the staff to switch focus on segment 3 and focus on the lower route by 2023 and convince those who oversee the funding, which we believe is totally possible, to move the funding over to the lower route if they do it in a timely manner. That's the goal we have. So writing your counselor, you can come to our meetings, send me an email, like us on Facebook, follow us, and the mayor, write to the mayor. It's just as easy writing to the counselor.
Sure. Thank you. Then I also heard that they were going to close the new, I forget the segment that goes from Central to 37th or Carlton. And I love that trail. I ride it 2 to 3 times a week, even the last month I have. And now they're going to close it for 2 years. Is that what I understand?
They're going to close it sometime in the spring because of the Erie Pier projects, which is a good project. The AOC projects are critical to the estuary and everything around here. We worked hard to see if there was an alternative way of not closing it, but they assured us, they looked at us and we agreed. They're going to be doing a lot of dewatering and traffic, and they'll be rebuilding that trail when they're done, actually. It would have been good to have timing come along where we could work at the same time, but just the way these financial packages roll and coincide, it didn't work. So it's going to be closed for, I think, a year. Wow. Sometime in the spring until the spring of the following year, unfortunately. So in our spare time here soon, we're going to be pushing for a more robust way through instead of just signage to get to segment 1. But yeah, it's unfortunate. But segment 2 is enjoy it while we can, and see how it flies. We really were hopeful that they could just use a section of it and close it temporarily, and then open it up, and they just saw no way that could happen.
Well, thanks for your efforts.
No, thanks, Ron. I have a hard time multitasking here. There's some chat here.
We've got the links to the Friends of Western Duluth Parks and Trails Facebook and website there. And then Andrea shared the email address for Duluth City Councilors in case people want to shoot them an email as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to read one of these. Yeah, how many people have been involved in this project is phenomenal. And to speak on the advocacy side of this thing, because that's one thing I wanted to talk about, is real quickly. I kind of got sucked into this stuff. I didn't sign up for 6 years of working so hard, but you just kind of get sucked in. And the reason you get sucked in is because of people you meet and the quality of these folks and how much work they've dedicated to stuff with no pay, just frustration. So it's been a wonderful addition to my life, and it's balanced the frustration out pretty well for myself personally. So if you want to get involved, we can always use more help, and just ask to be on our email list. You'll hear some stuff that we're working on, and if you want to get involved at that time, you can, or not. Just share information and write your counselors and the administration is the best we can do at this time, I believe.
Great.
Any other questions? It's coming up on 1 hour, and I think Stevie wants to go home or turn off her work. Maybe, I don't I'll stick around if anybody has questions, but I think I recognize a lot of the faces here. So hopefully the recording will go out and help people understand more. But it's a lot to cover. It's a lot here, big history there. Dick?
Thank you for tuning in. It's a fun and frustrating project.
Thanks again.
All right. If there's no other questions or discussion, I think we'll probably call it a day here. I'm going to share our links to our Winter Bike Week information again. We've got a couple more events coming up. Winter Biking 101. We're going to talk about the PED plan with James Gittimeyer tomorrow, who Mike and Dick mentioned a couple times. And thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you all. All right. Have a good night.
Bye.